All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Exceed. This is Gearface. I am joined today once again by a returning Chykka. Chykka, thank you so much for being here, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Hello.
Hello, hello. Glad to have you here. And we are sitting down today to talk a little bit about our good friend, uh, just a very good boy in general, Carl Clover, and his sister Nirvana. Um, really, really excited to talk about these guys. I don't see a lot of Carl Clover players. I don't know too much about him. I think he's a little bit underrepresented, so I'd be curious to see what you have to say about him. Couple disclaimers before we get started, as always. Number one, we're going to talk about playing to win on this show. That's not the only way to play Exceed. You can play Exceed for fun if you can believe such a thing. In fact, I encourage you to play Exceed for fun because it's pretty fun to do it. If the lines of play that we describe are not fun to you, please don't play that way. Play the way that you do find fun. I have a feeling that Carl can probably get up to some fun shenanigans. So uh, give him a try, even if the stuff that we're describing doesn't sound like your cup of tea. Number two, we tend to be pretty prescriptive about strategy on this show. Chykka less than most of my guests. He tends to see both sides of things pretty well. But that does mean that you might hear us say, always do this, never do this. This is always the right play. Just remember that Exceed is not a solved game and that these are the rules of Chykka's strategy with Carl Clover. They definitely don't have to be yours. Um, you are more than welcome to find your own lines of play and tell us all about why we're wrong. Please don't take our prescriptions as being prescriptive. Yeah. With all that said, Chykka, please, I'm dying to know. Tell me a little bit about Carl Clover.
So Carl Clover is a puppet character, of course. And what that means is some of his attacks, I guess, are actually Nirvana's attacks. And they calculate range from Nirvana. And she is represented by a marker on the board, which you can move around, like I guess primarily with your unique action, like your innate ability, which is you get to just move Nirvana in space. It is like very slow. But that also ties into the other aspect of the character, which is that Carl Clover is a grappler. And that's kind of represented by how some of his shapes represent like a dangerous high-low mix-up with like a fast attack and a mid-speed. And generally, um, like he likes the opponent's options going down because that makes um, a lot of his like threats like easier to pay off with.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. So I'm gonna move our cards up real quick so we have a little bit of room on the board. So I've talked to folks about. Oh, hold on. Where did I didn't get out my training dummy. I'm so unprepared for this lesson. I've talked to some folks before about grapplers in Exceed, and frequently, you've got your Zangief, whose preferred range is this. Right, you've got on Monday I talked to Dee about Imogene, and she is like very solidly a range 2 grappler. Um, so Carl is a grappler, but he's also a puppet character. Does that mean that his preferred range, is he like a zoner grappler? Is his preferred range just like this, that he's just got Nirvana next to his opponent?
You can kind of say that. Generally, well, so generally you want Nirvana to be either on top of or you want the opponent to be either in between Nirvana and Carl, or you want Nirvana to be in the same space as the opponent because that's when you get your +1 power, +1 speed bonus for your specials, which makes them like more threatening. Um, but at the same time, uh, I guess like I mean, depending on the board state, like sometime, like usually it might be harder for the opponent to get out of your options if she's closer to the middle of the board, or if or if she's closer to the board. If they just take a big move action or move a lot of spaces, it takes less time for her to recover her position. But yeah, like generally, like, I guess especially against characters that don't have fireballs of their own that can or any threats that they can hit Carl at like at longer ranges. You can kind of play a bit of like a a zoner puppet character.
Okay. So
Um,
unlike other characters that I've talked to, other grappler characters that I've talked about in the past, where like the goal of neutral is to get to a preferred range for yourself. It sounds like for Carl, the goal of neutral is to sandwich your opponent between yourself and Nirvana. Is that correct?
to an extent, I mean, I think that's ultimately like your payoff. And I guess it really depends on. It kind of partially depends on like how you want to play the character. Just generally, I kind of prefer not focusing so much on the sandwich earlier in the game, if it takes too much effort to create. But and I kind of just play a more um, like a more grappler style game in the macro sense of kind of just using normals and boosts to like kind of play good neutral, and then if it's like efficient for me to get the sandwich, I'll do it, and then I might generally try to put myself in a position where like maybe my opponent's cornered, but then if they want to get out of the corner, they have to like enter the sandwich, kind of
Oh,
things like
okay.
that.
Okay, sure.
It's like a more area control as Carl Clover, where I'm moving myself around a lot because it's just easier for me to move a lot of spaces at once. And But then if I just need to move, if I just need to adjust Nirvana's position slightly, or or I feel like if I'm in a comfortable position and I have time to move Nirvana to kind of set her up for later on, then that's when it feels best to move her.
Okay. Sounds good. That makes sense. So I'm definitely when you said grappler in a macro sense, so you are kind of like weathering your opponent's hits. You're sort of taking your lumps in neutral until you can get to a position that you like, and
Yeah,
then you pay out. Is kind of is typically how we describe grapplers. Is that pretty much what you're talking about?
yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I
It's
mean, there's well, Grappler is. I mean, sorry, Carl Clover. I mean, uh, like I think he could be played that way in terms of macro sense, but also he does have some more literal components of being a grappler, which is that once he does have the opponent, in the setup, the center setup, he has the high and the high low mix up with the fast and the mid speeds
right. So
to yeah.
he can like very explicitly in the short term be like, I'm doing grappler things. I have a thing that is a mix up that you need to call once you've got them in their preferred range.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I get you. Um, so all my character ability does is lets me move Nirvana around, and all Nirvana does is calculate calculate range from a lot of my stuff comes from Nirvana, and I have this sandwich power where I get bonus power and speed only for my specials and ultras. I'm also noticing that there's a whole lot more whole lot more text on this card about flipping Nirvana uh and all sorts of things about my opponent's attacks. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so Core Clover has a big drawback where they can or Nirvana yeah Nirvana can get punished if she's either out of position, or if she calls a mix up wrong, or if the opponent just does something really fast that's really safe. Where instead of having their attack hit Core Clover, if their attack is within range of Nirvana, or if they're on the same space as Nirvana, they can just choose to hit Nirvana to turn her off and then get free gauge that way. So you generally try to avoid letting your opponent just get free hits against her on to turn her off. Yeah, and like that's one of the things you have to be careful about. I guess when you're playing Call Clover. Um, but in some cases, uh, like you can also, one way to think about it is if they have the choice to hit, you might be able to play in a way where you can kind of force your opponent to either have to hit, to either choose between hitting you and hitting Nirvana, and in which case, um, usually if they're forced to hit you, then if they're forced to hit Nirvana instead of hitting you, then you're going to be taking less damage, I guess. It's kind of like one way you can think about how to hedge against, you know, how to hedge in like strikes where the opponent might be able to hit Nirvana, I guess.
Okay,
But that's
sure,
kind of a more. I might be getting a little bit too technical with kind of kind of talking about that right now, I guess.
sure. But that's the idea that my opponent, just reading rules as written, my opponent can, in this situation that we've put together, if they play sweep or something, um, they could hit Carl Clover and deal 6 damage and
Yeah,
add sweep to their gauge, and sweep has a hit effect, like all that stuff. Or they could say, no, I'm not going to hit Carl Clover. Instead, I'm going to hit Nirvana, and that will flip her over.
yeah,
Um, I don't hit, so I don't get my hit effect. I don't do my damage, but I still will. I still would add my card to my gauge in that case. Um,
yeah.
and then
So a case where that might where it's like most where it's the most straightforward for the opponent is, let's say, uh let's say this is the setup, and my opponent just wants to turn off Nirvana, or yeah, and let's say Carl Clover decides to, let's say Ryu initiates the strike, um and Carl Clover responds with Cambrio, but then Ryu ends up playing Grasp, then they can just simply turn off Nirvana before, because it's a speed tie,
right,
because
right,
in this position, Nirvana is not, sorry, Nirvana is not doesn't you're not getting the bonus from Nirvana, so Conbrio will only be 7 speed, and then if Ryu wins a speed tie, he can just turn off Nirvana before Conbrio hits, and then that's just a complete win for Ryu. So this, like, a situation like this is something that the Carl Clover player would want to avoid.
okay. And once Nirvana is flipped over, she's been disabled, which means she can't do anything. Attacks to calculate, range from Nirvana can't have. So none of these attacks work anymore. So this doesn't work. This doesn't
Yeah,
work. This doesn't
yeah.
work.
These four attacks don't work.
Okay, so
This one, yeah, or rather, they don't hit, at least. You can still, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there might be. I guess if you wanted to just draw cards, you might be able to play Con Anima, which I guess we'll get into that later when we talk about Con Anima. But
sure.
generally, you don't want to play any of these four attacks.
When Nirvana
Well,
is disabled.
yeah. But
And,
I do want to make a distinction that technically they are, like, they wouldn't be invalid. It's just that they don't, like, they would still be valid if you had a wild swing into them, or if you were to actually play them, but they just
right.
wouldn't hit.
They just probably wouldn't be a great idea to play in this situation because
Yeah,
of that.
yeah.
So, and then at the end of any strike where Nirvana's disabled, whether it's my opponent's or my strike, I flip Nirvana back over at the end of the strike during cleanup, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So so that's at least what the rules are saying. In terms of how this influences like what's going on in the game, like how do I ask this question? How how big a deal is it to Carl Clover if Nirvana is disabled? Obviously, it turns these 4 attacks off, and that's half my kit. That seems like a pretty big deal.
Mhm.
Um, is it a situation where I would be like, will my opponent often be playing in order to explicitly turn Nirvana off in your experience? Or is it a tough decision for my opponent between hitting Carl Clover and hitting Nirvana? Or is it mostly, should my opponent always be trying to turn Nirvana off? Should they always be trying to hit Carl Clover? Like what how does this impact play?
I think it generally depends on how you end up playing sort of playing the positioning game. I mean, if your opponent has usually if your opponent can hit you, they're probably better off hitting you because they're actually doing damage.
Right.
But sometimes, but like, if it's in a state where, let's say, neither player can hit each other with normal, then you don't want the other player to just be able to hit Nirvana for free and get free gauge, and then turn off your options that way. Um, and so, if so, like, there might be certain strikes where, the opponent might, might have to choose between hitting you and turning off Nirvana. And those cases, if they're kind of forced to turn off Nirvana, then that's not so bad for you, because you can kind of think of it as, if they had to deal less damage to you to win the strike, then
Right. So
it feels less bad, I guess,
she,
at the least.
it's like she's like taking the bullet for you. Like you probably don't want her to be flipped because you want to do
Yeah,
attacks with
yeah,
her, but if you can force your opponent to flip her over, you're happy with that, or less sad with that, maybe. Um,
You just don't want you just don't want to be in a position where you're essentially giving your opponent free resources by letting them just hit her like a punching bag.
okay.
Um,
Oh, sure,
yeah,
because they still build gauge, of course. All right, so you want to be
yes,
in situations at least where your attacks are threatening enough that they need to make a tough choice, rather than just beat up your sister for free.
yeah,
Okay. I also just reread this and I want to make it explicit now that I saw it. The cleanup effect on Nirvana disabled is if Nirvana was not flipped during this strike, you may flip Nirvana. So that is basically there to say, like, in the situation where my opponent played Grasp, cool, they flipped Nirvana. Now cleanup happens and Nirvana doesn't flip back. It happens next strike, correct? Okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
I wouldn't even necessarily say like force your opponent to make a decision. It's just that I mean, I guess it mostly really it just applies to like maybe Con Anima where because Con Anima is like a slowish mid speed, so sometimes well, I mean, let's say this is the positioning, um, and if the opponent plays cross, then and then they would be dodging you anyway. They would be dodging like most of your attacks anyways, so they would probably just deal 3 damage to you,
Right.
because like Con Anima won't hit. But like if they play grass, for example, uh, then they would they would choose to turn you off. Like if this was a different character with a similar mid speed, then they can just hit Clover and then stun you,
Right.
and then move you to a different position, and the mid speed would miss. In this case, they kind of have to. Well, they don't have. I mean, I guess they don't have to. They could. I mean, I suppose they could just they could go for the trade, but they're likely going to try to turn off Nirvana, I guess,
Okay.
so that Con Anima doesn't hit you back, right? In
Right.
which case,
Because the
there-
math
there's
the
some
math
there are
works
some
out better
like
then.
there's some sort of I guess you can say constellation factors. I mean, well, this attack specifically also has a constellation on it, which is after this attack did not hit, you draw 2 cards.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Um, yeah, but
So
I guess we'll talk. I mean, I keep coming back to this card, but we should probably talk
we
about
should probably
that
talk about it, right? Real quick before we actually get to the
later.
kit breakdown, one more question about the character ability, just to make sure I'm getting everything right. So if we're in this exact situation and Ryu plays Grasp, just like we were saying, and he says, "All right, cool, you played Con Anima. I don't want to deal with 5 damage. I'm flipping Nirvana." He has denied some of the value of this attack. He's at least denied getting hit. He gave you cards, but he also turned Nirvana off for the entirety of the next strike too. So he didn't
Yeah,
just
yeah.
avoid damage. He also set it up for later so that Nirvana couldn't do anything for the next strike. Does that also mean um that if you played Conbrio, for example, into Ryu's sweep, gets this actually might be kind of awkward because then it would miss Nirvana. I'm trying to ask you if it's
Yeah.
possible to disable Nirvana after she's already hit. That still works, right?
Yeah. So it's the disabling is part of the opponent's attack. It gives them before trigger, which lets them disable Nirvana. So let's say this is the positioning. If I play Conbrio here, I would push Ryu 2 spaces, and then he wouldn't be able to hit me back with sweep, but Nirvana would still be within the range of sweep, so he can still turn Nirvana off.
Right. Okay. And in that case, so he hasn't done really anything to deny this current strike. Instead,
Yeah, yeah.
he's saying, if this was his decision, he was saying, okay, I've decided then that having Nirvana offline for the next strike is also valuable to me.
Yeah.
Because both are kind of considerations, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Thank you for that clarification. Just making sure I got everything right. But yeah, if that's all you wanted to mention about the character ability itself, do you want to get into the kit breakdown?
All right. Or I'm trying to think. Should we talk about the exceed mode now or later?
Well, how important? I guess this is a good time to ask this then. what is kind of the overall shape of Carl Clover's game plan? Like is he building up to a specific ultra payout? Is he building up to his exceed mode? Like how, or is it flexible? Is it something that this his exceed mode is just an option, his ultras are just an option? How important is his exceed mode to him?
I think it depends on the matchup, and also kind of depends a bit on the way the game goes. But generally, I mean, the like he has. I would say I can. There are maybe three different ways it can go, or three different uses for his gauge. One is the exceed mode. The other one is primarily trying to aim for Rhapsody of Memories as a payout option. And but in some games, the resource costs just add up, and if you don't think it would be best to to utilize either of these two options, you can spend cards from Gage's Force. Um, but
Oh, just for like kind of general maintenance and economy stuff, that could be your payout.
what do you mean by that here?
You could, rather than going for like, all right, I am using my gauge for exceeding, I am using my gauge for an ultra. Your game plan could be, I'm using my gauge to just kind of do maintenance and economy stuff. I'm spending it as force for most of the game.
I don't know. I wouldn't really say it's a game plan, but it might
That
be something that
that might be how it
you're.
goes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you want to aim to do that, but some games might like the tempo might be very fast. You might be under pressure a lot, and if you do need to spend a lot of force, that's something you can consider. And then if you end up doing that, you're kind of foregoing the option to exceed or play your ultras, anytime soon. So it will affect your game plan, even if it's not the ideal. But it's not, yeah, it's like not the ideal game plan, but it might affect the game plan you end up going
It
for.
will become the game plan because your opponent is not complying. They're not a training mode dummy. All right, yeah. So in that case, do we want to? I think it makes sense to talk about the exceed mode right now while we're talking character ability.
Yeah. So the exceed mode is important for, I guess, two reasons. One is that first of all, Nirvana can't be flipped during strikes.
Okay.
And that's a really big deal because then you can play the zoner Carl Clover a lot better. Where you can kind of um, you can kind of like have Nirvana be here, and then you can play something like Confoco and like an on-curve Confoco, and they can't just simply play something fast to turn it off. And uh, it'll just be dealing 6 damage, and they'll need to respond to the slow. Or I guess or maybe like a fast dive, right? To hit Carl Clover.
Right. Yeah. Because
Yeah,
Nirvana is no longer useful as a target for them.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is like even more effective if let's say this was the positioning, and you have the +1 speed, +1 power bonus, and all of a sudden this is like very dangerous, right? Because this is 5 speed, 7 power. It's like above curve, and it beats sweep, and they can't just play grass to turn it off.
Right.
Yeah, and also, you can play something like Conbrio, and you can play something fast, and if they defend with the slow, they can't hit Nirvana back and turn her off and get gauge.
Right. Right. So in the situation where you're both close up, now my opponent has no incentive to actually go for Nirvana at all. They'll just punch me every time they
Yeah,
can punch me. So that might not be my favorite thing. But, you know, if I'm doing the zoner stuff, if I'm saying, Nirvana, you're over there, go beat them up for me, uh, her not being able to be flipped takes away a lot of my opponent's counterplay to it.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm in. There's more text. So as an action, you may move Nirvana one space, then strike. Okay, so I used to be able to move her
Yeah,
one space. Now I can just action compress a little bit.
yeah, yeah. So the other big thing is that Nirvana becomes way more mobile. So not only can you action compress by having her overdrive move Nirvana one space, the action also lets you move her another space and strike. So she has like basically like 2 or 3 times more mobility.
Wow. Okay.
Uh, yeah, while in exceed mode, because you can essentially move her two. Like normally in front side, you can just take an action to move her one,
Right.
and then your turn, and you kind of pass turn if you wanted
Right.
to kind of move her without using a boost.
Right, right.
But when she's exceeded, yeah, you can move her 2 spaces and strike.
And strike on top of it, which you couldn't do on front side. So it's like an accelerant. It just makes my whole game plan faster in addition to making her invincible.
I wouldn't. I mean, I guess in a sense, faster is accurate, but what I would say is that uh, once you're ready to to hit your threats, you can kind of just succeed, and it's really hard for the opponent to kind of escape from it because of how far she can move. If you kind of have her set up like properly at the beginning of the overdrive.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, like because like if she just starts in the middle of the board, for example, or or like here, then like your opponent can't really run away from her once you exceed.
okay. And I'm noticing that so he has a 3 gauge exceed cost, which would mean that he gets 3 uses of his overdrive trigger and 2 uses of his Nirvana cannot be flipped during a strike. Maybe more if his opponent strikes into him.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I have just in terms of like the value proposition of exceeding, I'm probably getting like 1, 2, 3, like 5 spaces of Nirvana movement and a couple strikes out of it. Is that a way that I could be looking at it just numerically?
That sounds roughly right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would say the other big thing about the movement is that uh your chances of getting the sandwich is much higher, and when you're trying to hit with these specials, you generally want to get the sandwich. So because like when you're on front side, you know, whenever you move Nirvana, likely your opponent is likely able to just respond on their turn by like moving out of the sandwich or like setting something up,
Because
where they
you're
can.
not striking. Everything you're doing is kind of slow if all you're doing is moving Nirvana.
Yeah, you're kind of just like when you're playing Grappler, you're kind of just doing your slow movements. Your move. It's like a move one action as a grappler, as a more traditional grappler,
Sure.
where yeah, your tempo is very slow. But then when you like when you exceed, that's when you're ready to hit the threats that you've been preparing to hit the opponent with, and uh, it's much harder for them to, I guess, react um, by changing their positioning because of how far she can reach, I guess, and how much easier it becomes to set up the sandwich.
Right.
And generally a big counterplay to call Clover is you try to avoid being in the sandwich so that you don't have to face like the threatening high-low mix-ups, and or just simply be like far away from Nirvana so that a lot of her options get turned off. But and that's why like a lot of really mobile characters tend to do well into Car Clover because they're able to more efficiently kind of get away from Nirvana and the setups that you can do with her. But uh, but if Car Clover is able to exceed, then he's much more able to uh, get his threatening setups on his own terms, and be able to just throw them out.
Right. Okay. So, and my exceed mode helps me with all of that stuff. I also I heard you say earlier that when you are Carl Clover, because Nirvana is so slow, it takes so many turns to move her into position. You frequently are moving yourself and leaving Nirvana kind of in a single situation, in a single position, or moving her less than moving yourself in order to set up your opponent. I assume when you're exceeded, now because Nirvana is able to move a lot more, you can sort of lean back and let her do more of the work. Is that correct?
I guess that's kind of right. Because during, I would say that like if you're exceeding, then you should be trying to play. You should be trying to play. These retacks probably like these two, but like also have this as. I mean, this is also an option, especially as a mix-up.
Right.
As a mix-up threat. But like these these are like your most running options, and also, I mean, if you have enough gauge, or like maybe at the end of your overdrive, you can play Rhapsody of Memories, but also you can set up your duet boosts, which is if your opponent is In Nirvana space or between you and Nirvana, you get +3 power.
Okay, so those are kind of the things I'm hoping to hit in Exceed mode, and if I have those in my hand ready to go, Exceed mode probably looks pretty attractive to me. Um,
Yeah.
do you typically is your preferred game plan as Carl Clover typically does it involve exceeding, or are you a more of an ultras player, or does that distinction not matter as much to Carl Clover because I don't know, maybe he can do both.
Um, I think it depends on. I think there's like a. I mean, I don't know if I strictly say one is more prioritized than the other. And it depends on the matchup, depends on the way the game goes. And sometimes, I mean, if the game is going well enough, then you might be able to do both, or you might be able to exceed, and then hit, and after you hit like one or two specials, you have enough gauge again to play
Right.
the
You
obsolete memories.
you exceed with with 4 gauge or maybe 5 gauge, and now you've got enough. Or your opponent strikes into you on your turn, and now you've got enough to play Rhapsody of Memories as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. Um,
And sometimes, I mean, sometimes you might also be boosting like Rhapsody memories, so maybe you'll have, in which case, um, you might end up, um, you might end up playing, just trying to get more out of strictly the exceed mode, I guess.
okay.
And yeah, and not so much Rhapsody memories if you just end up boosting it. But
Okay.
it really depends on it depends like deck order and like the matchup and like what your opponent does, I guess.
Okay, sure. But both are options. You want to keep your options open and be.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a situation like with other characters where it's like you are going. It's not Chun Li where it's like you are going to exceed pretty much every game.
Yeah, yeah, I would say. I mean, I think definitely compared to Chun-Li, it's not as fully absolutely 100%.
Right.
I think in a good deal of games, you're likely going to want to exceed at some point to be able to most smoothly chain your Confoco, your Conbrio. Um, just I mean, I think just like I just don't, I mean I think like I don't know if statistically is the right word. But I think
Just on average, you're likely to exceed maybe more often than not, but not every single game.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, I get you. And then final question. I promise we can go into the actual cards in a second here.
yeah.
I just want to make sure I got this. Um, uh, so 3 gauge, you know, by normal exceed character standards, 3 gauge is not that hard to hit most of the time. Like it's pricey. A 3 gauge alter, a 3 gauge exceed mode is it's not something you'll do on turn one. But I know from previous grappler lessons that sometimes like you are scrapping for every single piece of gauge that you get. How much of an investment is 3 gauge for Carl Clover? Can he build gauge well enough that this is comfortable for him or this is comfortable for him? Or should I be looking at like I get like one payout a game and that's all I get? How tight a budget is he on, basically?
Overall, I think he's definitely a pretty resource intensive character. He just has a lot of force costs kind of spread out around
Yeah,
his
so
kit.
he's got force special, force special. He's got a force boost, a one force boost. He's got a one force
Yeah,
boost. He's got a one force boost. You're right. Okay,
yeah,
and some
yeah,
some of that's probably just going to be coming from my gauge, just because I'm a grappler. I need to maintain mix up options, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's
Yeah,
going to be
and
it's going to be
Confoco as an
hard.
attack. Confoco as an attack is like often just a two, like it requires two force because you need to
Sure.
spend the force to move Nirvana one or two spaces.
Okay, and all that stuff is expensive. Um, I'm I'm going to be, I'm going to be building some gauge maybe, but I'm going to be spending a lot of that gauge just to do my sort of regular everyday like day to day upkeep stuff. It might be tough for me to afford 3 gauge or 3 gauge to exceed or throw an ultra. Then
Yeah. I mean,
okay,
I think I think it's like it's more that it would be challenged for you to decide, if you want to spend options from hands or if you want to spend gauge, and if there are games where you feel like you need to it feels correct to spend gauge, then uh, it kind of increasingly makes the exceed mode like harder to afford, I guess.
sure,
But in some games, you might still want to build up the gauge to afford it,
sure. It's in
or or to play your ultras, I guess.
they're in competition with just regular everyday that gauge expenditure for maintenance stuff. That's true of every character, but for Carl Clover in particular, that's tricky because he's just expensive.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I gotcha. I gotcha. All right, you have answered every question I could think of about these two cards. Shall we get into the kit breakdown?
All right. Okay.
I want to stress ahead of time that I don't believe that I certainly cannot speak Italian. I'm not sure if Chika can either.
I
I
can't speak Italian either.
I apologize in advance if we mangle any of these. Please continue, Chika.
All right. So the classic high-low mix-up, where you can threaten when your opponent is near Nirvana is Con Brio and Con Anima. Con Brio is the fast option where it's on 7, where it's printed 7 speed, but if you get the sandwich, then it's 8 speed, which is faster than your most opponent's regular fast 7 speed options or DPs,
Right.
which is very nice to have like as a defensive option. Um, and in a lot of positions, you can also, if they try to play slow, that's not focused. You can push them away, and they might just have to hit Nirvana as like a consolation prize. And as opposed to Con Anima, which is your slow mid speed option. If you have the sandwich, it's 3 speed, which makes it kind of a little bit closer to your typical mid speed, where you can beat sweeps on defense. But if for some reason you don't have the sandwich, then it's as a defensive option, it's much riskier than it already is, because I mean it's already risky because it only has 3 guard, and it only hits at like a specific range, or like like specifically the 3 spaces in and around Nirvana.
Right.
And but if you do hit this attack, it has ignore guard, so it basically beats. It beats sweep and focus if you're able to hit the opponent before they can hit you. And also they have to discard 2 cards at random, which is which is a pretty big
That's
payout.
pretty brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. And so even against block, if especially if they're not on top of Nirvana, because if they're, they can block all the damage, and then if they're on top of Nirvana, they can still turn off Nirvana. But if they're not on top of Nirvana, then this, well, I guess either way, this opponent discards 2 cards of random effect is also pretty brutal against block, because they have much less resources to block with after you hit them with it. And then it also has a nice consolation prize where if you're not stunned and you happen to not hit your opponents because they either moved out of the way or they turned off Nirvana, you can draw 2 cards.
So just these two cards obviously enable each other. They are they're two sides of a mix up. Um, when I'm at range, when I'm doing this, which seems hard as Carl Clover because I Nirvana can't move super fast and stuff. But if I do engineer this situation, these are obviously much safer than they would be if I was in
Yeah.
super close up. But realistically, for most applications of this character, should I assume that most of the time I'm going to be spending pretty near my opponent because my opponent is going to be trying to be near me?
I think the situations you'll end up in is, especially if your opponent doesn't have any ranged options, is that they'll try to approach you, so or get into like normals range, uh and then you might have Nirvana, like if you have Nirvana, if you have, like, let's say this is the positioning, right?
Sure.
Or like this is like this was the positioning. Then either they might up here, in which case Nirvana's just not really threatening at all. They might up here, where then your opponent has to, if they don't have grasp, then they kind of have to deal with this mix up to an extent, right? Because, well, like if you're able to initiate, I guess, if you wanted to initiate a mix up, then they kind of have to guess between which of these two you're playing. And then if they're in the sandwich, then you have an 8 speed option, or you have You have anything that you have an option that beats most fast options, and then you have an option that beats most slow options.
Right. So you just have a mix up that is enabled by the sandwich, or it's enabled by them being too far away to deal with you. Both are good for you.
Yeah, I guess yeah.
I- if you are back here and your opponent's not in the sandwich, but they might not be able to do anything about con anima anyway. Is what I mean.
Uh, yeah. Well, I think in this setup, basically they have to guess if you're playing con brio, in which case they would play a slow option. They would feel like maybe they might try to play focus. In order to take less damage and then turn off Nirvana. But then if they do, you have this threat to beat the focus.
Right. Oh, right. Of course, they can still hit Nirvana. They can still
Yeah,
flip
yeah,
Nirvana.
yeah,
All right. I should
yeah,
probably have
yeah.
been paying attention to the 20 minutes where we were talking about Carl Clover's character ability. Okay. Um, in any event, just having these two cards together gives me sort of like an above curve. It's a DP basically. It's a DP that can hit almost anywhere on the board. Um, uh,
Yeah.
and one that
I would
pushes,
say
which
that
is
I would say the zoning setups are not as effective until unless you exceed.
okay.
So the more potent kind of mixed up on front side is if as if they have to deal with something like
I
this.
gotcha. Okay.
Um, Yeah, where it's where you have the option that beats practically every fast option, and you have the option which beats practically every slow option. Um,
Right. So now they just got to guess, and the upside of hitting con anima is enough to make my opponent pretty afraid of playing anything slow. Yeah. So I mean, this is grappler stuff, and
yeah,
it
yeah.
it's enabled by all that stuff. Okay. Um, do we want to talk about boosts at the same time as we talk about attacks, or should we just go through all the attacks first?
I think for Carl Clover, I think I want to go through the attacks first.
Sure. Sounds great.
Because I think the attacks are sort of the main. They're the main. I think they're a bit of the main course for this character. Um, uh, yeah, like they're the main. I guess they're the main feature. I guess. I don't think the boosts are um really as important to how to play the character. I guess I'll get into that later.
Sure. Okay.
Um, let's see. And I guess one more thing that could say about Count Anima is that if you have the EX, it can be a pretty safe option to kind of just throw down in a lot of situations because then it'll have a total of 5 defenses, and then you either you just destroy your opponent if they play a slow into it, or or like if they play it fast, then there might be a lot of situations where they won't put the stun you out, so they might have to turn off Nirvana. But even if they turn off Nirvana, or even if they hit you, and even if they try to cross out of it, you still draw 2 cards.
Right.
So the EX makes like it trims down a lot of the loss cases of this card, I think.
Okay. Sure. So in that situation that you just described, so the defenses. How do I put this? The In the situation that you described where Ryu crossed out, he could have crossed out and just punched Nirvana. Without the EX. I'm sorry, without the EX, he could have
Well,
crossed out.
hold on. Let me. I guess I should clarify. Well, with Cross, he would probably punch. He would probably punch Clover anyway because he would be
He would dodge.
dodging.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but like let's say if Ryu played Grasp, or if he played Assault for some, or like maybe if he tried to. Well, actually, trying to think. What's a good. Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be dangerous. It would be dangerous for Ryu to play Grass, but uh, hmm, what's a good? I guess if Ryu were to for some reason try to play if he just wanted to play an attack, I guess, while in the sandwich for some reason. I guess it might be uncommon because especially if it's Ryu, but like because Ryu can easily a lot of yeah, Ryu can easily move out with with his action with his UA or with some with quick step. But there might be a lot of cases where your opponent might try to um, they might try to play an attack which maybe does more, which has more than 3 power. And if you have the EX con anima, then it's not likely to be stunned, and if they can't simply like move out of Nirvana's range, they might be forced to turn off Nirvana instead of hit you to try to
Okay,
stun you out.
there we go. That's actually that's what I was asking you about a second ago. So the ways that you could get this after are if you literally whiff in this situation are if you whiff but are not stunned,
Yeah, yeah,
or if your opponent hits Nirvana.
yeah,
And the EX attack would basically force them to hit Nirvana instead because they're way less likely to be able to break the 5 guard if they were trying to keep you from getting that after effect.
yeah. Or well,
Okay.
if they were trying to if they were, I mean, there might like if they were able to stun you out, they can just simply hit Carl Clover and stun you. If they wanted to not get hit by Con Anima, right? Like,
Right. They
let's say they
and
were,
if they wanted to not give you the after, they could have just stunned you.
yeah, yeah, and then that would both prevent my attack from going like from they would not that could not like that might prevent uh like if they stunned me out, then without running away, they would also. I mean that's one way for them to avoid taking the 5 damage and the card loss, right? Um, but if I have 5 guard, then they won't be able to stun me out.
So they're gonna have to.
So
They're probably gonna have to hit Nirvana if they're gonna avoid the attack at all.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I get you. Okay, cool. Um, shall we move on to Confuoco?
Yeah. Okay. So Confuoco, at a lot of it's 4 speed, so at a lot of ranges it might be. I mean, at the typical like at the starting in our starting positions, range 4, it's like an on curve option that hits pretty hard and gains advantage, but it's pretty expensive because it costs 1 force to play it, and then if you want to move Nirvana, it also costs another force.
Right.
And so that's kind of like one. That's kind of like the on the on paper way to use it, I guess. But if in a lot of cases, if Power Clover is sorry, if the opponent is in the sandwich, then this suddenly becomes a mid speed, kind of similar to this, but it's instead of 3 speed, it would be 5 speed, and it would deal 7 damage and gain advantage instead
Right.
of opponent discards 2 cards.
Yeah, that's actually pretty brutal.
Yeah, yeah. So this is also it is also something for your opponent to, I mean, you have to deal with, I guess, in this if they're in this sandwich when they have to deal with your mix-ups.
Right.
And you have some speed boost, so uh, at any point in the sandwich, not just a range one, but like at any point in the sandwich, if they have, if you play a speed boost or you play the EX, all of a sudden you can hit like 6 or 7 speed. So I would say this is your big payout option. And so you can think of it as something to consider in a mix-up. But like I think this is something that you want to think about playing, like making sure you can hit like later in the game. So even though it is like a mix-up option, like like with Conbrio, I would say that a way to think the way to kind of think about this character's like game plan is that if you wanted your opponent to be afraid of mix-ups, then um, you can set them so like you have these 2 cards for them to deal with, and then you want to find a way to try to hit this in a safer way possible.
I see. So they're going to be responding with options to one of these, and whichever one they run out of, now we can exploit that hole. Cool. They're out of fast options. I put some. I hit them with Confuoco.
Yeah,
they're out of slow options. I put some speed boosts down, and I hit with Confuoco.
yeah,
This is a late game card, in other words. Um,
yeah,
a couple of rules questions just to make sure I'm evaluating stuff correctly. Number one, uh, this costs 2 force to use every part of, but because the 2 force costs are separate, it's probably I couldn't pay this with 1 ultra. It's a force special to validate, and
yeah,
then the before effect is another force. So this might even be more expensive in terms of like raw card material even than it looks. So this is very pricey to play. Um, but also the before effect doesn't really synergize with Nirvana's character ability, correct? If I was in this situation, this opening position that we talked about a second ago, or maybe here is better. Um, I couldn't, or actually here we would have to do. I couldn't say, okay, I strike with Confuoco before effect, Nirvana moves. Now I have +1 power from my character ability because this is specifically when I set my attack, correct?
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay.
And this is very important to keep in mind. That uh, this power bonus only applies if the conditions are met while when you set your attack.
Okay. Um at the start of the strike, not during any before
Yeah,
movement or anything.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this is either, I mean, but the before movement could still be really useful to me because I'm closing and getting advantage if I hit with this, which means that I can do something even scarier next turn, maybe with that movement. But it isn't going to help me confirm um the the character ability part of the payout. It's just going to come from the actual card
yeah,
being strong that I'm paying out.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in a sense, I mean, the close two is in some situations a drawback. In the case of, if you're only dealing 6 damage, you might have a lot of game states where the close two means that you'll get hit back by a focus or sweep.
Sure.
But there are also upsides to it, which is if you needed the close two to, to let you play another attack on when you once you gain advantage, whether that be cantabile or play a normal or um, yeah, so forth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So mix up option, technically a mix up option, but really it's just a high reward payout option.
yeah.
Okay.
I would say like this is kind of like your a lot of cases it's like your safe option. This is the mix up to the safe option, and then this is the payout option.
I gotcha. Okay, cool. How about Cantablo? Or
Uh,
should we talk about
yeah, let's talk
the
about
last one that
Avante
goes
first. Yeah,
from
because
Nirvana?
yeah, so this is like the kind of, I mean, I guess out of the four attacks that hit from Nirvana, this is like a bit of the odd one out because this is a projectile, so it requires Nirvana to be away from the opponent
Right.
for you to hit with this attack. So it's not part of the rest of the mix up that Carl and Nirvana are trying to do with the other three specials. And it's more of oftentimes it's like a poke option, and like at the starting positions, you can kind of mix this up with dive, because, or I guess, I mean, or I guess Confoco, I guess,
Right.
because these two cause you to close in, whereas this one it's one speed, so it it kind of ducks under a sweep, and then if they play focus, you can just kind of move one space, and you don't get hit back by focus. So if you wanted to play the Volante as a mix-up, uh, this is when you would do it. But the other use of Vante is if you're kind of close up to the opponent, and Nirvana is far away. You have Volante as an option instead of your other specials. You have Volante as kind of as an option you can play, and it kind of becomes more of like a slow that can trade pretty decently and gain advantage, and also help you get the sandwich. Um,
Oh, right,
so
because Nirvana's behind me now. I'm behind my opponent. I have the sandwich doesn't have to be here.
yeah,
The
yeah,
sandwich could be from further out as well.
yeah.
Okay.
I would say usually, I mean, in this position, there isn't. I mean, there. I mean, I guess like Confoca becomes a little bit more of a threat, but I guess there's not really that much of a threat. But I guess like Duet is up.
Oh,
I
right,
mean,
because all of these
you know,
actually, this is specifically specials and ultras, so I don't get +1 power, +1 speed sweep or
yeah,
something from me, and
yeah, yeah,
all my stuff's coming
yeah,
from Nirvana. So if I got the sandwich off of Volante, I'm like, I guess I better have the other copy of Volante or something else to capitalize on it quick.
yeah. Like that might be Duet, but I guess like what I mean, especially if you can take the corner, for example. Well, I mean, I guess. Uh, well, with regards to sandwich, I guess if you wanted to kind of maintain the sandwich, you can take the corner. In which case, it could be much harder for the opponent to like, actually get out of the sandwich, and then you can kind of just
You
slowly
you
move
can
Nirvana in.
bring Nirvana in, right? But then you're in the corner, and that's dangerous too.
Yeah, but alternatively, I guess if your opponent really wants to avoid the sandwich, uh, they might take the corner, I guess, and then you have corner pressure, but you don't have the sandwich. But I guess it kind of I mean, if we wanted to talk about like overall game plan, like one way you could play the character is if you wanted to apply corner pressure and then sort of make it so that if they wanted to leave the corner, they have to step into the sandwich.
Right.
And then you can kind of when you have this position, you can kind of like steadily move Nirvana closer so that if it's like if they wanted to not get hit by your sweeps, then your focus is they have to spend a lot of resources to like try to get away
To get
from.
all the way to the other side of the board or something. Sure, sure,
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
yeah,
In the situation that we first talked about, where something like this, where Volante would be specifically the hit effect of Volante would be an important threat. Um,
yeah,
this position looks nothing like the position you described when we wanted to hit any of these cards. So I'm assuming that I'm not trying to set up a situation to hit Volante. Volante is going to be a threat
yeah.
because my opponent is going to try to like get away from the sandwich, and I'll wind up in this position because of something my opponent did rather than something that I did to set up Volante. Is that correct?
Yeah, it doesn't really deal like in most situations it doesn't really deal that much damage, and like it only deals a lot of damage if you strike without a range one and they don't
Right.
move out of the way, I guess.
Right.
But it can, but like in some situations it could be a nice card to trade with and kind of give you a bit of momentum, give you a bit of
Right.
tempo with with the gain advantage and like the movement, where you can maybe go from not having the sandwich to setting up the sandwich, or like if you have the sandwich, for example, this can deal like 6 damage, and then you'll lose your sandwich, but like maybe
But now you've
you
got
might
corner
get a
pressure
position where
again.
you can do. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, like maybe you can do this and then cross out, or
So
uh,
I guess my question is then, like, if I have my opponent here, for example, like, this is an awesome opportunity to do this mix up that we were talking about a second ago. My plan is not like, if I have this as an option, I'm not like, awesome, I'll get them out of the sandwich with grasp and now I can throw Volante at them. Like, I'm not trying to set that
yeah,
up.
absolutely not. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Volante is there to like mitigate my worst case scenario, not to be a payout in its own right. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah, I think yeah, I would say that's like relatively accurate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, or just to like help you, kind of help you just get into a better position when it's good value, I guess.
Right. Sure. Because I mean,
Or just like you play it as a poke if your opponent can't, your opponent can't respond back to, can't respond back to it, or like you can play it as a mix up with, I guess, a dive or with conflict in certain situations. Um, it's a bit of an odd card, but it like has kind of some specific uh like use cases that give you some bit of value, I guess.
sure, I gotcha. And it's not going to get stunned. You'll get your after movement almost definitely. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
How about Cantabla?
Okay. So Kangawa is a pretty important card in Carl Clover's kit because it's, well, first of all, it's the one option that doesn't target from Nirvana, so like it doesn't get affected if Nirvana is turned off. But also it means that regardless of Nirvana is, it's it can be a pretty threatening option. Well, or it can be a rather maybe threatening is the wrong word, but it can be it's an option that's like online, and it's very useful for Carl Clover because it's a 6 speed 1 to 3. In cases where Carl Clover is not doesn't have the opponent in the sandwich, which means that um, when your opponent has to think twice about playing the range 3 mix up because um, you can defend with Cantabile, and you're in most cases you'll be able to hit with this card and stop the opponent from doing what they're doing unless they're playing like sweep or yeah, unless they're playing sweep basically, I guess.
Or a character specific like a Tatsu or something. But yeah, I mean, six speed and a pull is is a pretty good way to diffuse a lot of the range 3 mix up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, basically it beats Assault, it beats Dive, it beats Spike because of the can pull Spike to range 1. I guess in some situations maybe they'll still be able to hit Nirvana back
Well,
with Spike, which is kind
true.
of funny,
I mean
but
that wouldn't stop this card though.
yeah,
So
yeah.
okay.
So that's like I mean, and I guess it does have the after Nirvana move 1, which is actually a pretty big part of the card. And I mean, I guess that can help. Maybe that can prevent your opponent from getting engaged off of Spike. But that's kind of the general defensive utility. And then if you have the sandwich, it's 7 speed, which is which is like significant, which is like I guess like even scarier as a defensive option because
Sure.
then they can't like
They couldn't even cross out at that point.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And
Um
so just because this is the only one that doesn't come from Nirvana, that doesn't mean that I don't get my ability from it. Like this is just specials and ultras. It doesn't say specials and ultras that come from Nirvana get
yeah,
get
yeah,
bonus power and
exactly.
speed. So this will hit for 2 and at
Yeah.
7 speed. That's that okay.
And then as an offensive option, that's when like the advantage matters, and you also get to draw one. That could be nice. To you can kind of play it and then gain advantage and then threaten like a mix up or threaten. Well, I mean, if you sorry, let's say Nirvana's like kind of slightly out of position. Um, let's say she's here, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
So you can play it offensively and then pull your opponents, and then use the after to move Nirvana, and now suddenly you have a sandwich where suddenly you have a sandwich in like from my game state where the sandwich didn't seem easy to create, right?
Right. With advantage, meaning my opponent can't do anything to get out of it before I can capitalize with this scary mix-up option.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like yeah, or maybe like they maybe like this is the positioning. Somehow the opponent was able to run away from the sandwich, and then you can play counterplay as an option, and if you win the mix up, I guess, or if you well, I mean it's pretty fast, but like so it'll let it hit, but if but even if they play a slow option, I guess, and even if you lose the mix up in that sense in terms of like getting swapped back, you might still be able to pull them 2 and then into the sandwich, or like if Nirvana's here, you can pull them 2 and move Nirvana 1, and then now you can threaten this mix up, or your opponent, or at least make your opponent have to consider that if they don't move out, they can't just strike here without having to deal with this mix up, right?
right. You're in your one of your scariest situations. They need to address that right away. So this is an enabler. This sets up a combo.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I can't help but notice that Carl Clover seems to have 3 cards in his kit that gain advantage. Um, is he the kind of character who tends to do a lot of advantage chaining shenanigans, or like because you are probably trying to hit with this in the late game because this is sort of a setup tool? Like do you not find yourself cashing, or because his resource generation isn't very good? Do you just not find yourself cashing out with a ton of advantage at once very often?
yeah. I would say that's probably right. I would say he doesn't really do a whole lot of like he doesn't do a long advantage chain by any means.
Okay.
It kind of has like short bursts of like yeah, just short gaining advantage, like Cantabile into something else, or like maybe he can do 2 confocals in a row potentially in some situations. Um,
Oh, sure.
uh,
And all of these advantage chains, these short advantage chains that you're describing, would all have some way of setting up Nirvana. So the actual use case isn't 50 turns in a row. It's
yeah,
we were here, Cantabla. Now we're here. Advantage strike with Nirvana immediately, or Volante strike with
yeah,
Nirvana immediately. It's getting them into the sandwich and then capitalizing is what this advantage is for.
yeah, yeah.
I get you. Okay. Should we talk ultras, or should we go on to the special boosts?
Oh, let's talk ultras.
Okay. I also don't want to forget. that we have a secret ultra over
Yes.
here that was up because Carl Clover has too many cards. I couldn't fit them all on the board like I normally do. Where do we want to start?
Let's talk about Rhapsody Memories, because I think that's the ultra that you like might want to play as part of your game plan, I guess, or because it's the one that like it's the one that's like proactively a reward because well first I mean it has a bunch of different traits, but it's like it can be pretty reliable because it's 4 speed, it's 5 guard, and your opponent cannot turn off Nirvana if you play this during a strike. So those all make it fairly reliable in a bunch of situations. And it also hits for 5 power. So then and if you have the sandwich, it's
Might
6 power and
might
5 speed. So that's
might be 6/5 speed, right? That's very safe at that point.
yeah. And then it lets you draw 2 cards. So it's a pretty nice economic boost. If you choose to play the ultra. And then it also has after advance retreat up to 2, and that can be that's really important because it lets you potentially dodge out of the way of a lot of counterattacks your opponent might throw at you, such as like sweep or focus. And then they can't even hit Nirvana back because this attack says Nirvana cannot be flipped.
Right.
And then you can also just choose to move into whatever position you want for the next strike. So this is a very high value attack to hit in the kit.
Okay. And obviously, we talked quite a bit about Carl Clover's gauge economy not being the best of all time. 3 is a lot for him
Mhm.
to. So this is probably going to be in direct competition with his Exceed mode. It might be tough to do both. Um, I have not seen so far, other than the one on where do we put it? Cantabla. I have not seen a lot of card draw in his kit. Is this hit draw 2 like? Is that a major windfall for Carl Clover? Does he not have a lot of card draw either?
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of card draw, so it's like,
So
well,
that's
which is yeah,
that's a
yeah.
big
So it's
deal
a
on a character with bad economy then.
yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
He's also very tempo sensitive because the more turns the opponent has, the more they can just set up to, they can move out of the sandwich or like set up something against the sandwich. And so just being able to prepare, like being able to draw 2 and like be able to
During it during a strike without
do
taking
something else you want without having to take a turn to prepare is nice.
right, without taking a low tempo action and moving. So you're getting damage, positioning, card draw. You're kind of getting everything you want out of playing this all at once.
Yeah.
And it's safe enough to probably play on defense. And so you could probably just get your opponent it's not quite gaining advantage, but it's kind of like gaining advantage. And just attack with your sandwich that you set up with your after ability right afterward.
Hmm.
Okay. And that is high enough value in your opinion to compete with this. At least like
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe not 50-50, maybe 60-40 in favor of the Exceed mode, but this matters to his kid. This is an important card for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, I mean, in terms of how they compete, it like I mean, it goes back to like the matchup, the game flow, and some maybe like maybe in some games, maybe you somehow are able to play this twice and then you don't exceed. But if you find it hard to, if it's a matchup or game flow where it's just where maybe you draw these early and then your late game kind of consists of like you know paying out by hitting these, and then you probably exceed, right? I
Sure.
guess.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I guess it's not even just I guess it's yeah. I mean, you're likely going to
Right. What else are you
uh
going to do with your gauge at that point if you have an overage? And you could boost this. Like we haven't
yes,
talked about
yeah, yeah,
boosts yet, but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
exactly,
a
yeah,
okay. So your Exceed mode is a default partially because there's other things that could happen with these ultras that would mean that you wouldn't play them. But it's a consideration too.
yeah.
All right. How about oh boy, Le Tables can Le Tables Cantata? Question
I
mark.
think you probably got it.
Uh,
You
uh,
probably got it.
neither of
Like
us
top
neither of us know. Let's pretend. Let's call it Cantata. I'm pretty sure about that part.
Tablis Cantata. So this is kind of a more defensive, reactive ultra, both in the sense that it doesn't do very much damage, and has 7 defenses, like 2 armor and 5 guard, um, which is nice. In terms of defenses, and really the main reason to play this is if you happen to have Nirvana like really out of position, you can move her up to 3 spaces. So it's kind of like a fix your mistakes or a uh, really lost out on tempo somehow, or I managed to get way out of position, and because my opponent forced me into a game state where where like I'm out of position, where Nirvana's out of position, but I can but this ultra can kind of like catch me up in terms of like the tempo that I'm behind by.
Right.
Like if let's say uh, my opponent decides to run away from Nirvana, and then they decide to strike into me at this range. I could play Cantata's Cantata, hit them back for a little bit of damage, but then move Nirvana up to 3 spaces, and then suddenly start threatening, threatening some other things again.
And you would never, in the situation you described, things have gone wrong, right? Like
Yeah,
you're not super excited to play Cantata as like a game closer or a way to uh like finally my master plan has come together. I can play Cantata. This is for when things have gone wrong, and things will go wrong. It's a two-player game.
yeah,
This is how you're going to fix your mistakes, as you said.
yeah,
So this is what you play when things are going right. This is what you do when you've got enough gauge and things are going right. This is what you do when you have to do it.
yeah.
Okay, I get you. And I mean, like it looks like Focus, right? It looks like it's a super safe 1 to 2 card that has a lot of value other than power on it, but it just costs gauge.
It's like a pure like it's kind of somewhat. I mean, it's 2 gauge, so it's cheaper than than the other Ultra and the Exceed, but it still feels a bit expensive because it's like not something you really want to do.
Right, and it's
But
Carl who doesn't have a ton of gauge.
yeah.
Okay, I get you. And then finally, uh, tell me about Deus Ex Machina.
So this is quite the funny astral because if you don't win the game on the spot, you have a seal Nirvana, and then all of a sudden you're kind of just playing with half your deck essentially. So it's can be pretty scary. Can be a pretty scary option to actually play. It also requires 4 gauge, so you kind of need to have a lot of resources sitting around to play it. Um, but it does do 10 or 11 damage, or like depending on if your opponent's in the sandwich. So and it has 4 armor, so there might be some. Really, the only time you play it is if you wanted to manual reshuffle and the game is kind of close to ending and you feel like and or like this somehow answers certain threats your opponent might be able to throw out to kind of clinch the game.
Right.
But if it's if we're at like 4 to like 8 life or something, or 4 to I mean like 4 to 10 life, then sometimes like you can get your opponent into a spot where they really have to seriously respect it, as an option which can kind of cause you to win the game. And it only hits 3 spaces, which is somewhat. I mean, in some ways, it's it looks like it might be hard to hit because it only covers 3 spaces under and next to Nirvana. But there are kind of ways to actually set it up so that it covers like a lot more spaces, which is if you play one of these 2 boosts, um, which have as the before effect, you can move Nirvana up to 1, and now all of a sudden covers 5 spaces.
Right.
It covers cross in like a lot of situations, which is an option that easily dodges Deus Ex Machina otherwise.
So it's maybe not practical for every game, just because you might not be manually reshuffling, you might not be have 4 gauge to play, but this card isn't a meme the way that
I think
some
it
Astros tend to be.
I think it looks like a meme, but like there are certain situations, and also there are certain ways to make it like less of a meme than it it looks,
Then it
if that makes
appears,
sense.
sure. Have you played this card before, or is this mostly theory crafting?
I've played it like at least 2 or 3 times, but maybe yeah. So I've played it before.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I might have. I think there might have been a game where I played it and somehow didn't win this spot, but then won later. I think, which is a really
Yeah,
funny
that's
game.
awesome. I appreciate, by the way.
That's like something that shouldn't happen, but it somehow just did. I think,
Right,
but
right.
it's
It's
been a
like
while ago since I've actually played it, so it's my memories of actually playing this card are kind of vague.
so
Aside from knowing the setups for it.
it's something that you will do in a long exceed career. You might play Deus Ex Machina a couple times and have it be the correct decision. It's not your plan A, certainly, but it there
Yeah,
are things
yeah.
to make it work. I also appreciate, by the way, that the after effect is you seal Nirvana, which means that if you get stunned, you're fine, except that this card has stun immunity, so you will always
Yeah,
get your after.
yeah.
That's kind of fun. Okay, so that's the kit. It sounds like we are doing mix up options, set up a big payout at the end with Confuoco, uh set up some sandwich combos with Cantabla or Volante as I can, hit with an ultra if I'm not going to exceed. Is sort of where we're at right now. Am I correct on pretty much all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess specifically, yeah. I guess I maybe do want to touch on one kind of focus setup, which is oftentimes you can kind of play defense, and if they can't, if Nirvana's like a little bit further out, then um, it's hard. It's actually it's gonna be kind of hard. Like that's another way to set up Confoco, because then they don't have they might not have the damage to like stun you out of Confoco, and they can't. They might be too. Nirvana might be like far enough away where they can't turn her off.
They can't hit her in either to deal with it. Okay, sure. Because defend definitely helps on stunning. If you were in this situation and they play grasp and they don't stun you, they're like, cool, I hit Nirvana instead, and
Yeah.
now the attack doesn't work anyway. Okay. So they have more outs than other characters would, so you make sure that they're far away. Um, cool. All right. Yeah, that's a solid combo, and we can come to the normals in a second. Do we want to talk boosts?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say that. Um. Okay. So a lot of Car Clover's boosts are very situational, and maybe not boosts that you kind of want to aim to play for. But I would say, uh, the most solid boost that he has would be the boost on Volante, which also fits nicely because the attack itself is
It's kind of niche.
like, yeah, it's like situational. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very nice that his boost is like is like pretty good to play in all situations, because it gives it gives him speed, which is nice because like a lot of his neutral, like when he doesn't have the setup, like in an actual neutral state, like he relies on normals a lot and also relies on Cantabile to play the neutral game. So the plus one speed is nice, but also like having the advanced retreat one is nice because it lets him dodge out of a lot of slow attacks in surprising ways. And like I mean, you can kind of think of it as he gets to be chipped for a strike.
I was about to say, yeah, anyone who wants to know the value of having a little bit of extra speed and the ability to advance to retreat one after a strike, go check out the chip video that Chykka and I did. Uh, it, now suddenly, now suddenly in this position, grasp dodges sweep, right? Like you
Yeah, yeah,
1, 2, back up one, cool, you're feeling good. There's a billion applications for.
yeah. You can play cross and then you can go here and then dodge sweep that
Oh
way.
yeah, you can stack your triggers to move over your opponent and then back up. Yeah, tons
Yeah,
and tons of
yeah.
ways to
Yeah,
use
and then
after
also
movement.
it works very well with his with Rhapsody memories because um like so normally Rhapsody memories is 4 speed. If you have the sandwich, it's 5 speed. But then if you have this plus one speed boost, it's 6 speed, which makes it incredibly hard to dodge. Um, but then it also, if for some reason your advance retreat up to 2 can't, is not able to dodge sweep, then maybe with this extra movements on it, you can dodge sweep.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, advance or
um,
retreat 3 is a lot of flexibility.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I actually advance or retreat. So it's advance or retreat 1, and then up to 2 more. So yeah, you can move anywhere with that pretty much.
yeah,
Okay, cool. So that is a consistently strong neutral boost that I would be happy. And like plus 1 speed on defense gives you some defensive security. They pass a turn back to you. You're like, cool, dive, spike. You got stuff you can do just with the normals, but
Yeah, yeah,
This gives me a lot of flexibility in neutral. It sounds like.
yeah. And the other thing you can do with this after movement is, you can actually use it to help you get the sandwich. So if let's see, we were here. You can play dive if you have this, and you have a 5-speed dive. That then, if you wanted to, you can get to the other side. And then now your opponent's in the sandwich, right?
Right.
If you're here, you can play assault, and then you can close two, get to the other side, gain advantage. Now you have the sandwich. Then you can maybe follow up with like just moving Nirvana one to threaten like the range one, high-low mix-up, or you can boost like duet. Which I haven't explained yet, but it's it's your plus 3 power payout option. Or if you wanted to get the sandwich, like that's something that this after movement lets you do.
Okay. Yeah. No. This sounds like a much more attractive boost than Volante sounds as a card. So I sounds like I'd be happy to play that almost anytime.
Yeah. So this is like your kind of, if you like, this is like your good old reliable, like, I don't know if necessarily bread and butter, but like this is just always a nice boost to be able to play down to uh that's like very versatile, I guess.
Mhm.
And I would say okay, so that's like your versatile neutral boost. Um we have duet here. This is your main payout boost. If you get the opponent in the sandwich, or if you get them on top of you, then you can boost this to do now strike plus 3 power. If you maintain the sandwich during the strike. Um, I guess technically you could. It's a hit effect, so you could also play grasp, for example,
Oh,
and throw them into the sandwich.
to get them into the sandwich. Right. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more niche, I guess, because it's like kind of telegraphed. I suppose it's not
Right.
really something that.
Yeah.
And also,
They're like cool
yeah,
focus or whatever.
yeah, exactly. So like generally, I mean, I guess the most common, the most like the safest way to like the safest and most effective payout is probably with Conbrio, because it's, if you have the sandwich, it's all of a sudden it's like 8 speed, 7 power. Right?
Right. Oh, sure. Because so if you are if they're in or between you, if they're in Nirvana space or between you and Nirvana, you already
Yeah,
have this. So
yeah,
it's actually any time that you would get anything from this boost, it's actually plus 4 power.
yeah,
Okay. And plus one, plus four, plus one is a lot of stats, Chykka. That's pretty good.
yeah.
Okay. So
Other
I'm looking to hit
oh,
I'm
sorry.
looking to confirm this kind of whenever I can.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
this is a big deal if I can land it.
yeah.
Okay.
Another option to pair with Duet is Cantabile. And this one is like more flexible because it's like Cantabile is a much it's much the range band and the situation you would play it in. It's much more flexible because like you can play it when your opponent's not like directly next to Nirvana. And like let's say this, and you can still play Duet and then still have this as like the fast side of the mix-up, right?
Right.
Because it's still, I mean, uh, it's doing 5 damage, I guess, which doesn't stun out slows, but it's that's
A
it's still a
one
way to confirm this plus 3 power.
a 1 to 3 5/7 that gains advantage and draws a card is a pretty decent ultra, honestly. Like
Yeah,
that's not a bad card for a 1 damage attack, for a 1 power attack. All right, so
yeah,
you put it on something fast, you put it on something consistent and strong that's probably going to hit, especially if like an opponent's options are down. It's a payout. It's a payout the same way that that Confolco's a payout. You use it when you're pretty sure you're going to hit with it.
yeah. I mean, it's not as scary of a payout, I guess, like because it doesn't really beat everything. It just but it does, like, if you just kind of want to get if you just want to get the value of like having the plus 3 power, then this is like a pretty safe way to do it.
Right? Yeah, it's a good
And
boost delivery mechanism.
yeah, and I guess just Cantabile is a nice card because it's so fast. Like it allows you to. It's like a good vehicle to like cash out on like power bonuses.
Right.
So if you have like Fierce is nice for Clover to have because it's very easy for him to convert to confirm the +2 power because he has counterplay.
Into Cantabla, sure. And you already mentioned that duet is frequently something that you are going to want to be playing in exceed mode because it's so much easier to get the sandwich.
Yeah,
So it you know, cool. I spent the gauge. Now I'm not going to have enough gauge to play Cantata. Awesome duet. Um, you can you have that combo available to you.
yeah.
Okay.
I think ideally you probably want to set up situations where you don't I mean, where you don't like maybe you don't need to use Zuat in exceed mode to get because there might be situations where like you can play Conbrio like very safely in exceed mode, where you don't need to stun like where you don't need to stun out the opponent with Conbrio to for it to be for it to like for you to win the strike like entirely convincingly, I guess.
Right,
If
because
that makes sense.
I mean yeah, you if they sweep, you push him away, you already won the strike. You didn't need
Yeah,
the bonus
yeah,
power.
yeah,
That was just
yeah,
extra. I get you.
yeah. But I mean, if you just wanted to cash out on the +3 power, then I guess often if you have the resources, then exceed mode might be the time to do it.
Right, because this is expensive, especially if you're playing something that like Conbrio that costs another force. This is a lot
Yeah,
of resources that you're dumping on a strike.
yeah. Kind of similarly, like I guess if you wanted to play with Confoco, for some reason, like I mean, like if you just want to cash out, you have this one game state where you just feel like it's the time to cash out.
Right.
Then yeah, you can play Duet, and this is going to deal like 9 or 10 damage,
It's
but you're going
it
to be spending a lot of force
it,
in the
it
process.
it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 force
Yeah,
for admittedly 10 damage, but that means that it's kind of like Deus Ex Machina. It's like that you need to end the game with that, or else you've run out of everything.
yeah.
Okay.
Or just like do maybe you do it in a situation your opponent doesn't have that many cards either, so like you get an advantage, and then you just both spend the next 2 turns just
Just
getting your
prepping up
resources
again,
back.
right? But they're 10 damage lower than you. Sure, I get you.
Yeah,
Okay. So that's those two. We got our good neutral boost. We got our good payout boost. Where to
yeah.
next?
Because we can talk about Virtuoso. This is also kind of like a good neutral boost, but it's just a lot more expensive than Allegretto. And because it's this is just a 0 cost special boost, whereas Allegretto Virtuoso is a 1 force cost ultra boost.
Right.
And a lot of times you just want speed, then like Allegretto is a much more economic way to do it. But maybe you spent your Allegrettos, you haven't drawn it, but you have this boost, and if you just want to boost Swift, then a more expensive Swift, you can do it. But another nice thing about this is that it has before move Nirvana up to 1 space, and what that means is you can threaten your your range 1 from Nirvana mixed up at like range 2 without like spending it. Well, you can spend your turn boosting this, I guess, instead of moving Nirvana 1, and it's like I guess it's like a more expensive way to do it, but it kind of keeps in some situations maybe it keeps maybe you want to keep Nirvana's positioning more flexible, or like or you just want the extra power, I guess. In
Yeah.
which case you might do that. And um, and the other niche application is you're not using the move Nirvana effect for like to confirm a special for this strike, but maybe to set up for a future strike. Like if you wanted to play assaults, then maybe you play assaults and then you move Nirvana 1, and then on the next turn
You have
you
advantage,
can
right? Okay, and
yeah yeah
now you can throw your mix up. Interesting. Okay, sure. And also,
yeah
so in this position, all your specials and alters are now +2/+2, which is that's a strong stat line. That's Way of the Warrior. That sounds pretty good. But if you do like before move Nirvana up to 1 space, as we talked about before, this does not during the strike. It does not give you the sandwich.
yeah
You need to already be you need to already so threatening from here with or honestly even threatening from here with or here, for example, with Conbrio is real with before I move Nirvana up to 1, but it wouldn't give you the stats. It would just give you the range. Correct? I'm sorry. It would
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wouldn't give you the stats from the character ability. It would give you the stats from the card.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
get you. I get you. But if you're already in this position, now you've got +2/+2, and also the ability to threaten from greater range. So that's that. It's either a setup tool or a payout tool. It sounds like.
yeah.
Okay.
Or could be maybe a bit of both. If like I guess if you maybe you if I don't know, like if Nirvana is like really far out, then maybe you like in this state maybe you can play this boost, and then uh that can help like
Oh,
Nirvana get in.
move in and hit with Confolco or something.
Yeah, yeah. Because like then you get the you're able to hit with Confocal and you get an extra
Right.
+1
And
sweep,
you have the
+1
+1
power.
+1 and the other +1 +1. So yeah, that is another incredibly you dumped your whole hand on this payout, hope it's worth it card.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I get
yeah.
you. Okay. All right. So three pretty solid stat boosts so far, and I'm not seeing any other numbers of any other colors on
Yeah.
the rest of my cards here. So what else we got?
Well, hold on. Before we move on, just speaking of normals, and how they synergize with these boosts, I kind of didn't really touch on it much with Duet outside of like I guess the niche grass, but like if you have, I guess if you have the sandwich, like or even if you don't have the sandwich, you could play something like Cantabile as a fast mix up, but like as a slow mix up, you can play a normal, right? You can play assault, you can play sweep, right? And you don't get the bonus from
From this,
the
but
normals. Don't get the bonus from Nirvana, but they get the bonus from Duet.
right,
And
and +3 power assault sounds great. Like
yeah,
that's done sweep. I'm good with that.
yeah. And the other thing is, they can. I mean, I guess they can try to, even if they turned off Nirvana. I guess it's still
Oh, these are
uh,
safe from dealing with trying to deal with the Nirvana payout. That's right.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and yeah, like Assault just beats again like 7 power sweep. Sorry, 7 power Assault beats sweep, and then 9 power sweep basically beats focus.
Yeah, beats and
Yeah,
hits for
yeah,
9. That doesn't need
yeah,
much explanation. That's a high number.
yeah,
Okay, so super solid on normals as well. Um, Especially if they're expecting you to try and stack bonuses from Nirvana. You can fake them out with a normal and still get a lot of value.
yeah, yeah. Like they might maybe they'll try to play focus in response to Conbrio, but then you actually play sweep and beat the focus.
Yep, sure. Okay, yeah. So
Um,
so pretty devastating mix-ups enabled by Duet then.
yeah.
Okay. Where to next? Or we can. Oop.
Oh, sorry, I put it into your hand by
It's
accident.
all right. It's all right. No problem.
Okay, so these are gonna be like the three main boosts you'll be playing from your specials kit. The other boosts will be like probably your normals. And then for these four boosts on like Carl specials, I would say they're all pretty situational, and a lot of them are about kind of like fixing mistakes or kind of like catching up on tempo. I would say let's see, which one should I cover? Okay, I guess I'll cover the one on Cantabile first. This lets you lock Campanella. This lets you move Nirvana into your space and take another action. And you primarily use this if Nirvana is kind of stuck on the wrong side of the board, and somehow your opponent is able to run away, and you decided to catch up with Carl, but Nirvana is still far away, and if you don't feel like you have time to kind of move Nirvana a little bit closer to the middle of the board before doing something, you can just boost this and immediately move over here and take another action, and then that action could be like moving your one space to immediately, threaten the mix-up state, or like, if you're exceeded, maybe, you can move one and strike, kind of things like that, I guess.
Okay. So just a lot of flexibility and a lot of control over where Nirvana is, but like if the game is going well, you would rather be beating up your opponent. And Cantabile is a way to kind of start a combo, and that's valuable.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, Katabi is valuable because it starts a combo. It's very strong neutral, whereas La Cabanela is only. I mean, I guess being able to move Nirvana from anywhere on the board to into your space is it's like if you need that, then it's like lets you move Nirvana a lot of spaces at once.
Right.
But it's really kind of like a reset button where you only really do it if you're just not where if you really need Nirvana to be threatening something right away, and she's just not in a position to do so. And you're also kind of giving up a copy of Cantabile to play this boost. So
Sure. Sure.
it's a lot. It's lots of, it can be a lot to give up depending on the matchup, I guess,
Okay.
and
And
the
as
game's
you said,
going.
these are for fixing mistakes, so that tracks. Okay.
Yeah. And then let's see. Yeah, this one. Hurry, sis. So that lets you. You may flip Nirvana or move her one space and then take another action. So if your opponent was able to flip Nirvana face down and you wanted to threaten something immediately, like or you wanted to play one of your specials that calculates range from Nirvana, and and you're not able to exceed, because exceeding also lets you flip Nirvana, which is a nice thing about in terms of tempo when it comes to exceeding, is that you might kind of you might be able to kind of just let your opponent flip her face down and then decide I'm just going to exceed anyway, so I don't lose out as much on
Right.
the fact that she's flip face down.
And other from what we've seen, at least, other than this kicker and this boost, the only other way to flip Nirvana is the cleanup at the end of the strike. So it's not like you can like take some turns to flip Nirvana, play some neutral to flip Nirvana. Other than those two effects, it sounds like you kind of need to strike otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, technically you have this ultra, which the after effect, one of the options is you may flip Nirvana, but like
Oh, right. Okay.
that only really matters if your opponent turned her off like this decided to turn off this strike and then you're flipping her back in the
And
same
you're
strike.
flipping
Because
her back,
otherwise,
right?
yeah, because like otherwise if she's already flipped over, then you can't actually even move her because it says
It says you
when
can't,
she's
right?
disabled, yeah, can't be moved. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But even that involves striking. So this and my exceed mode kicker are ways to flip Nirvana back in neutral without actually striking it with or having my opponent strike into me with anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if
I,
you need to flip her back, or if you just need to like maybe you want to really hit a Cambrio, so you might let's see your opponent somehow moved out of the way. Maybe you boost this to move her one space, and then play the other copy, which is like a little bit of a desperation move, I guess, or like it's not something you want to do, but like if there's some setup that you really want to hit like this turn, if you maybe you have a bunch of boosts out and you just want to confirm duet or something, and um then this could be a boost that you might feel like you have to do, but you're dropping a copy of Cambrio, and that's like a big part of your fast mix up and one
sure.
of your
Yeah.
big like
You're
threats.
getting rid
So
of one of the cards you'd like to be playing in that situation anyway.
yeah.
Um, I also noticed. So both of these that we've talked about so far have been 0-4 special boosts, so they're cheap. But the thing that you just described is okay. Uh, put Nirvana into a position to play a kind of expensive card. So
Hmm.
and even if I'm not playing the other copy of Conbrio, which would take two more cards or two more force, so the card itself and then one more force. Even this and then take another action. The other action very well could be another boost. This is taking more resources than it looks, and so is this because they take another action, or they could be taking more
Yeah,
resources than
you
they
can
look.
think of it that way. Yeah,
Okay,
like
okay,
you only want to be doing you only really want to be boosting these if you have a plan to do something else afterwards, because otherwise, you can just kind of play more slow tempo without spending these cards, I guess. Um,
sure, because they're important for other reasons.
yeah.
Okay,
Um, and like if you I guess if you don't strike and if you kind of just do something else that's not urgent, then your opponent can probably take their turn to like get out of the bad situation that you might put them in by like that you might be scaring them with by like you know moving Nirvana to to a position that you want it with these cards.
Right. You want to, if you are going to spend one of these cards, you sort of do need to capitalize immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Generally.
I get you. I get you. Where to next? We want to talk about fine.
I guess we can talk about fine tuning. It's kind of a little bit similar too, because it's it's another boost that lets you kind of move Nirvana, and but it's like expensive because it costs a force.
Right.
And so it's like kind of similar to, it's a little bit similar to this boost, except instead of giving you stats, it just lets you strike sooner. Um, but but like I guess like you like it only moves Nirvana one space, right? So you always have to consider, well, why would I want to do this instead of just simply taking my action to move Nirvana one space?
Right.
Um, and um, and then there, there are only so many cards that care about where like Nirvana's positioning.
And one of
Which is
them's
this card
and one of them's called
itself.
anima, right?
Yeah,
Like you're spending
yeah,
one of
yeah,
them.
yeah. So it's like kind of niche, I guess, in that sense. In terms of, and also you basically, it's expensive, and it only feels good to do if you need to absolutely play a certain strike like right now, because otherwise you can simply just move Nirvana and it covers the same distance, right?
Sure. And I mean, like looking at just like with these are slightly more expensive than they look because taking another action probably involves taking another card from your hand. This one force, the boost itself, and you're striking, that's more resources. So this is more
Yeah,
expensive than
yeah,
it looks.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. You're
I
not
don't
drawing cards to at end of turn.
right. And
That's
I'm
that's
I'm
odd.
not sure how great Carl Clover's wild swings are, so that strike is possibly coming from your hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Um so pretty
Yeah, so these
niche.
are these are all like things that kind of like, if you need to slightly fine tune Nirvana's positioning, or you need to recover from like a mistake you made, um, then you might feel like you might feel like you need to play them to do something right now, but otherwise they don't really give you as much value as just
It's
moving
just
Nirvana or
as
doing something else.
just playing regular old neutral.
Yeah, and with these two cards, they kind of, if you boost them, they use up one of your safer options.
Right.
And that's like something, and then like these are pretty good on defense, so like your opponent has a lot less to worry about. If like when they see a copy, like they have to deal with a lot less of your defensive options when you drop one of these drop a copy of one of these attacks.
Okay. Sure.
Uh,
And they're happier to strike into you then. And this one even gets rid of a important mix up option that you probably want to be representing.
yeah, it's either. I mean, I think in some cases you want to represent it. In some cases, like this character has a lot of force costs, so if you want to spend force, sometimes like Con Anima is a good choice. Like often
Some
it's a pretty good choice because it's
sometimes
not.
that's going to be it.
Yeah, because this, you want this attack, you want this attack, you want this attack, you want this boost probably.
Right.
So if you're not spending normals, you're probably spending this.
This one might be the odd one out. And normals are probably going to be useful to you too. So I mean, like
Yeah.
no two ways about it. Carl Clover is going to have some difficult economic decisions to make.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then
And
we
then
had
lastly we have the boost on this. So I'll
yes.
put these elsewhere. Okay. So this boost is I mean it's alright. Like if you just want to move and strike, then um it's gonna be nice to have. It's just that I mean it's just like, I mean I guess yeah, it's just that there aren't, I don't know if there's that many attacks where it's which where like advancing 1 or 2 is needed to like play it effectively. I would say like I guess maybe cross, uh and maybe if you wanted to play a spike, I guess that's like or mix that with the spike, then like maybe that's worthwhile. I guess, and maybe the other cases, if you wanted to get the sandwich, then you can do it. But uh, I mean, I guess that's only if you really want to aggressively threaten if you wanted to aggressively threaten this mix up. Otherwise, you're giving up like Confoco, and that's like your kind
That's
of like one of your big payout
one of your big
options.
pout,
And
exactly, sure. it
Yeah, so if
whatever
like if you
whatever
don't,
you're hitting with has to be worth more than that.
yeah, exactly. And there are like you can kind of like you like this is a card that like makes you like that is like kind of gets you to play faster tempo. But that kind of uh like if you're playing him in a more grapplery way, then you might be able to feel like you can kind of play a bit more slower and kind of conserve on resources. And if you're doing that, you can, you know, maybe you don't feel like there's an urgency to like boost this.
Sure.
Yeah, I think if your hand was like in some like I don't know, like I guess that's such. I feel like the most common use for this is maybe I'm in the corner and I want to play this to boost cross. Sorry, I want to boost this to play cross. And yeah, like that's maybe that's like that's probably the use case that I've encountered the most with this boost. 'Cause then like maybe you're ready to like if you're ready to exceed, for example, and you don't feel like you need this copy. Maybe you have like your hand has like all your other payout options, and uh you don't absolutely need this copy of Confoco to pay out. Then maybe like you can cross, and then even if your opponent disables Nirvana afterwards, you can exceed, and then
You
all of a
flip her
sudden,
right back over and now get into some stuff. Okay. But otherwise, Confoco is too important, and you are uh, losing a major payout option in order to hit with something that had better be worth it. Even if you get your opponent into the sandwich, it might not be if you're losing Confolco.
yeah,
Okay, okay. Um, all right. So that's and then obviously there is burst, which every Astral has. If you are taking the time to reshuffle to get Deus Ex Machina in your hand, but you're not going to play it, burst is kind of always good, right? Like it's
yeah, especially on a character like Clover who
right.
likes having cards.
Who's not going to have too many cards otherwise. It's another source of cards, right? If you happen to get Deus Ex Machina in your hand. Okay. Um so that's all we've got. Any any particular like does Carl pretty much use normals the way that other characters would, or are there any like extremely unique interactions for him that does he value certain cards differently based on all of his stuff? Are certain boosts really important to him, or is it pretty much normal stuff?
A lot of it falls under normal stuff. It's just that it it's probably more important for him to play them right because of how much more because like a lot of his specials are 'cause he's both a puppet character and a grappler. So a lot of his like a lot of his options can be threatening if they're in the if you set them up for it, but when you're not. But like in terms of the setup, it's like the in terms of like how flexible they are. They can be kind of narrow in terms of the use case, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
Um,
Con Anima is only going to do Con Anima stuff. It's not. There's not a lot of use cases outside of where it's good.
yeah.
Okay,
Like yeah. So like a lot of like being able to play good neutral with your normals and normal boosts is probably like more like Carl uh employ might have to it's probably more important to get that right, I guess. And like he probably has to spend more of his early game relying on it until he is able to get the setups and the and and play able to get the setups and able to like whittle like kind of attrition your opponent's resources so that you can you can either exceed and then play your payouts, or you can play yeah, or you can or just like find ways, yeah, like 'cause, like it's probably later on in the game where um you have more of the openings to actually play your specials, which and that's when they can hurt.
so until options are down, until you've actually forced your opponent to respect some mix-ups and drop some options and run their own offense, you're probably safer to just rely on
Yeah.
normal boosts for neutral and normal attacks um for kind of
Yeah.
like filler offense until you can get into a position.
Yeah, I would say your neutral is like your normals and then Cantabile, and then having having, I mean, this boosts most of the time, but me sometimes this attack uh if we're at range 4, or like if if we're range 1, but like Nirvana's far away, this is kind of like this is like another slow option that you can play. But it's still like I guess it's still I mean it's still compared to other character specials, it might still feel more situational, I guess.
Right. Sure.
And then this is kind of your if you happen to have um the sandwich, then you can play this mix up. You can have this as a mix up option for and like, your opponent's gonna think twice about playing sweep or playing focus. Um, in other like as yeah and yeah, and then this is kind of just like if you have the sandwich or if in exceed mode, this is like then becomes a reliable option, but it's still more of a late game thing, and um, it's also like it's also something that you can kind of if you just have it around, it's like a threat, right? Your opponent might always think about respecting it. They would have to consider respecting it every time they get into the sandwich.
Sure.
Um, and then this is kind of a generally late game payout with some setup or with exceed mode.
Right. So all of those things, like you listed like pretty specific use cases for quite a few of them. Your neutral tools notwithstanding, kind of everything else you're relying on your normals for, and they're going to be taking up quite a bit of your plays in the early game, maybe even
Yeah,
into the mid and late game, until you can confirm all the stuff that you just said.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I know some. I think like uh, I mean, I guess in some ways people might. I think in some ways like I think it's easy to kind of look at Clover and kind of look at how his specials are really situational and think of him as like normals man, but it's more that it's like early game he relies on his normals more, and then his specials kind of come into play in more specific situations, and stuff like Confoco is more of a late game payout. So it's not like his specials are non-existent. It's just that they require like a lot of them like
Yeah.
require like more thought to play, and they're
Yeah.
not just things that you can like just slam down in
It, it's like
like
it's
common
like
situations.
it's like your whole game is going to be spent getting to the place where these cards are good. This is what
Yeah,
you are going to be playing while you're getting there, and sort of like when you're there. Now these cards are online, and you'll probably be relying on them more. But you need something to do until then.
yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I guess like even I guess early mid game, like if you can get if somehow you're able to not spend a lot of resources and then get into a game state where where you have a sandwich, then like that's probably what you want to aim for, because then these options become online, uh and then like these options are kind of narrow in the sense that they're only online when when your opponent is near Nirvana, but then once they're online, they're things that your opponent has to respect in some way. Um, and because like Cambrio's 8 speed, it's always going to be a strong defensive option, even if even if it ends up like trading down, like I mean, it's like a DP, right? But faster.
right,
Um, yeah, and it covers basically every fast option your opponent has that's unboosted, and then Con Anima covers all the options. Um, so in that sense, like they have the more literal experience of a grappler, where uh, in the early mid game, if you somehow get your opponent into the sandwich in a way that's like efficient and that doesn't require you spending too many resources, uh, then yeah, like these two can become a threat.
right.
And I think it's very easy to. I mean, I guess like you look at Carl Clover and you look at how a lot of his attacks require Nirvana to be in specific spaces. So maybe a lot of players might like spend a lot of time and effort trying to like set up the threats like sooner, but they kind of overcommit to like
Sure.
trying to get the sandwich, I guess.
I spend 4 turns moving Nirvana one by one onto my opponent, and he's like, "Awesome! You've given me free 4 free turns to do whatever I want."
Yeah.
Okay,
And they could also turn Nirvana off, right? And even after you get
sure.
them to the right space. So
Right, right, yeah.
I think it's like easy to maybe kind of like over
Like
if you're
over,
trying to
like
play for if you're trying to play to if you're trying to play for to play these specials like early on, like it's easy to kind of
like tunnel
fall into a
vision,
trap, I
kind of.
guess. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I can't speak to like how players actually like what their mentality, like how they feel about
Right.
like what their mentality is, I guess. But
Sure, but if you overemphasize hitting your specials early, odds are you are ceding tempo to your opponent, or you are using too many resources to get in, and you are going to
yeah,
have trouble later on.
yeah,
Okay, no, that's great advice.
yeah, and like he's a grappler in the sense that early on your opponent has more options open, so there's like so when you play I mean like with these cards, like it'll be more of like a pure mix up or like a what kind of what order my opponent drew their cards in. Um, but like once they drop key options, then a lot of some of these cards that are mix ups might just be able to like, win the like they might go from being mix ups to cards that simply win the strike because your
'Cause-
opponent dropped options that would win the mix would win that side of the mix up.
Sure, yeah, and now because you've been patient, because you've waited, you've had the opportunity to turn a mix up into a free combat win.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay, cool. Um, any other strategic considerations or anything like that, or should we move on to counterplay and wrap it up?
Um, I guess just I guess just to recap, just like uh don't like over commit to like getting the sandwich. Don't spend too many resources to get a sandwich that you might not be able to truly capitalize on. Um, and kind of just and just be thoughtful about uh where Nirvana is and like what setups you want to do with with Nirvana and how you can set up things like Con Anima, or especially Con Poco, I guess, to really pay out. And that would probably be some combination of like defense, light, and you know, uh, and basically your speed and yeah, and your two other speed boosts, I guess. And then like Fierce is nice for both setting up. If you want to throw your opponent into the sandwich and threaten them with the sandwich mix up, you can gas them into that. But also um, you can boost Fierce, and then that it's very easy to get value off the Fierce, from your fast options. Um, yeah, so I guess that's, and then when it comes to Nirvana positioning, if you can get corner, like sometimes you can just get, if you want to keep the sandwich, you can take the corner, but then um, if you if you don't necessarily want to do that, you can also just try to. If you have like a lot of slows and a lot of good range one options, you can apply the corner pressure yourself, and then
And,
if they want to
and
get out of the corner, they'll have to enter
make
the
them
sandwich.
make them walk into the sandwich, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. All right. So then, uh, that's all the Carl Clover stuff. How is my opponent going to be stopping me? What are Carl Clover's weaknesses? What does his opponent have to do to deal with him?
So mobility is generally pretty good against Clover because it's an efficient way for you to get out of sandwich, and it's kind of similar to how mobility is good against a lot of grapplers because grapplers are good at like very specific ranges, but they're kind of slow in terms of like moving around to like threaten those threats, and that's kind of similar with Call Clover where like with when Call Clover moves Nirvana, it's slow, but um it's like the tempo is slow, I guess, and she can only she only I mean yeah, like she can only move one space at a time and she doesn't really get much else out of it, I guess. So um if you can efficiently uh leave the sandwich or leave like the or just leave like the preferred range of the grappler, I guess, in which case, in this case, it's like, if you end up next to Nirvana, um, then that's one way to counterplay her, or counterplay them, I guess, Call Clover and Nirvana. Um, and yeah, and just a lot of their options are very specific. A lot of yeah. And they have to. I think early on in the game, especially when Nirvana is not in a position to be very threatening, a lot of their game plan is with normals. Um, but yeah, a lot of his game plan is with normals. So,
So
um,
until then, you just kind of beat them up. Like you run your character's offense because they're not doing anything that terrifying. um, until they've actually got you into a situation, into a setup.
Yeah. And I guess I mean it's probably harder if like the Carl Clover player is able to effectively um like kind of try to counterplay you by being able to efficiently keep Nirvana at your favorite range and kind of threaten. I mean, I guess it's counterplay. This is more like Carl Clover counterplay to other characters
That
where
that sounds fine too. I'll take it.
yeah, because I think a lot of grapplers they have a specific like favorite range, and uh, the opponent can always just move away from it to their own favorite range, right? Which is often different than the grappler's favorite range.
Sure, of course.
But I mean, I guess with like Conbrio and Conanima, it's like the Clover's favorite range is often whatever range Nirvana's at. So if you can just keep Nirvana at the opponent's favorite range, then it might make it harder for them to play the cards they want to play.
Right.
Yeah, because like if I mean, yeah, if you're playing Jin, for example, maybe normally you want to go to range two and do a lot of stuff, but then now it's a lot harder for you to go to
Now,
range two and do things safely
yeah,
because
now Nirvana's at range 2 and you're playing area denial at your opponent's favorite range, right?
yeah.
Okay. But so in order to beat Carl Clover, you you use your mobility, you stay out of his range, you know what his ranges are. And until he's in the setup, he's probably fairly weak defensively because he's mostly going to be relying on normals. So you just
Yeah,
kind of
and then
and his big above curve option. Um, and other than that, you just kind of run him over. It sounds like.
yeah, like more or less, or just run circles around him, I
Okay,
guess.
sure, yeah. You sort of yeah. So yeah, maybe if you're running him over, be a little careful because you might be spending options that will let him do those mix ups later on. So you just kind of play hit and run with him.
uh, yeah, I would say that's a good. Yeah, you want to make it so that it's like the Call Clover player has to maybe spend a lot of resources to threaten Nirvana, or otherwise not, have as many threats, when they don't have the sandwich options up.
Right.
So you want to make it expensive for them to either in terms of resources or in terms of tempo to threaten the sandwich and threaten their um yeah.
Okay. Cool. Anything else you wanted to mention counterplay wise, or really about anything else, or are we good to wrap it up?
Um, I think we're yeah. I don't yeah. I think I think I covered most of the things about Call Clover.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chika. This was awesome. Really, really, as always. I mean, it's always a blast talking to you, but I really appreciate your time and your expertise here. And
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a pleasure.
yeah, of course. Um, I believe that this is the last one we've got you on the schedule for this project. So for imagine that we're doing like a hazy flashback to our Chun-Li lesson and our Chip lesson and our Treasure Knight lesson. I want to thank you over the course of these last like 6 months for all of the work you've put in and all of your help with this. It has been really, really great talking to you, and I really do appreciate your time and expertise on this. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And folks at home, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Go give Carl a try. No one plays him. Please go play him. He seems cool. I'll see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.